I just got back from seeing The Apprentice, and it was a really strange viewing experience because, first of all, I booked a seat on my own, as I often do. There was no one near me. But when I arrived, there were two guys sat right next to me. But then one of them said, "Oh, I'm sorry, we were just sat in these other seats and the view wasn't that good. Do you mind if we stay here? Do you want us to move?" And I thought, yeah, I want you to move. I wanted to sit by myself. But obviously, I'm too English to say that, so I just sort of said, "No, it's fine, by all means, sit next to me." But then strangely, the guy in front of me decided to get in on this conversation, and he just piped up and said, "I'm only here because Trump doesn't like this movie." And I thought, I don't really care why you're here. But then the guy next to me said, "Oh no, I'm here because I love him. I think he's great. He's fantastic." So while I was annoyed that I was sat next to these guys, I suddenly became fascinated because I thought, this guy loves Trump. So why has he come to see this movie? Because none of the advertising makes it look like it's going to build him up to be a great guy. But then I thought, maybe this is going to be a curious viewing experience, because I'll get to see this guy's reaction in real time, and boy, did I. But I'll get to that later. Let's just move on to the movie for a little bit. I was so excited to see this film because it married my obsession with movies with my obsession with American politics, and obviously right now that obsession is quite intense given that I'm recording this and this movie is coming out with just a couple of weeks to go to the 2024 election. Now, if you've been living under a rock for the past 10 years, here's the premise. It picks Trump up in the 70s when he very first meets Roy Cohn, who was this fierce and formidable lawyer. He represented a lot of very powerful people, and he was a very brutish and cruel man. And he helped Trump define his brand. And throughout the movie, he teaches Trump his rules for success. He has these 3 rules, which are, I think, always attack, always deny, and always claim victory. And we follow this all the way through to the breakdown of their friendship and to the end of their friendship. The cast is fantastic. It's obviously led by Sebastian Stan and Jeremy Strong. Jeremy Strong is amazing. In the first movement of the film, he's Roy Cohn in his prime. He knows exactly who he is, what he does, and what his moral compass is. And then about halfway through the movie, this isn't a spoiler, but just a heads up if you don't want to know what happens. Halfway through the movie, his world spins on an axis and it's turned upside down, and we get to see a much more vulnerable side to Roy Cohn, a much more insecure Roy Cohn. And the way Strong navigates that performance is amazing. He's amazing. We then have Maria Bakalova as Ivana Trump, who was Trump's first wife. What she's given to do is kind of breathtaking. She gets some tough scenes to perform, and they're highlights in the movies because despite the fact she's not the central figure of it, she's an essential part. And what she's able to communicate through her eyes, through her face, through her pain, the pain she feels throughout this marriage is... It is a breathtaking performance. And finally, last but not least, Sebastian Stan is masterful in this film. This might be one of my favourite performances of the year because it's not an imitation of Trump, it's not an impression of Trump, but Trump's spirit is very much there. If you've ever watched any of the Trump American Dream documentary, or you've just seen some archive footage of him from his younger days, Sebastian Stan nails it. This is a younger version of him where there are echoes of who he's going to become, there are echoes of who we're more familiar with, but he's not there yet. He's still cooking, so to speak, and the way he guides that performance from a very young, very naive, and I suppose still very insecure Trump into a brash, vulgar, nasty, and still very much insecure older Trump is mind-blowing. So let's go back to the guy who sat next to me, because the movie starts, and as Trump and Cohn meet, and they have some initial bonding over lawsuits, and the Trump village is refusing black tenants to stay on their properties, or if they're allowing them, they're charging them like 4 times as much. And Trump needs help. He needs the lawsuit to go away in order to get the financing, I think, to build his hotel. So he goes to Roy Cohn, and Roy Cohn teaches him the trick is not to win the case, the trick is to have something on a powerful and influential person, and he basically games the system so that the case is thrown out of court. Now, the scenes are not played for laughs. There are moments in the movie where you're supposed to be laughing at them, but the movie is showing you how horrible they are, and you kind of laugh at some of the crap they say. And this one scene in particular is horrifying, because Trump is gaming a system and Roy Cohn is gaming a system where there are going to be no consequences for his blatant racism. And later on, a very similar thing happens where Trump wants to build his hotel and have a load of tax breaks for it. And a similar thing happens where he's building his hotel, he doesn't have to pay tax on it, and again, Roy Cohn is gaming the system. And at both these points, the guy next to me is laughing along when Roy Cohn sort of shows his hand and shows what a clever job he's done of gaming the system. The guy next to me is piercing himself laughing, and very much in a oh, great job, you know, this were, maybe I could be wrong, but that seemed like it was his intent. Because then throughout the movie, he would kind of laugh whenever Roy Cohn would say maybe an offensive word or whatever. You know, this guy was very much enjoying that. But it was weird, like no one else in the cinema was laughing at that point. But he was. But what I started to wonder is this. Is this just a difference in morality? Because Roy Cohn has a great speech in the movie where he talks about his belief system and the idea that morality is nonsense and it's invented by people, and people can be broken up into killers and losers, and that's very specific language, killers and losers, and that's the way he sees the world, and that's the way he games the system. And that reminds me very much of a Andrew Tate way of viewing the world today. There's a kind of modern manosphere lens you could view this through. And then I began to wonder if when Roy Cohn is doing these things, the guy next to me was seeing it as a victory, almost. Even though it's like the movie is saying they are doing these things and taking advantage of other people, to him, they took on the system and they won. Despite the fact that when they built the hotel, Donald Trump allegedly did not pay an awful lot of the people who built his hotel, so take that as you will. The next star of this movie is the director, who is Ali Abbasi, and it's such a well-crafted vision. And it's so well executed, and it's shot almost like it's a documentary, but it's very much not a documentary. But it's that kind of shooting style that it's not flashy, it's not showing off, it's almost guerrilla-like, which leads me to my other favourite thing in the movie, which is the cinematography. And what I love that they do is whenever you see archive footage of New York in the 70s and they shoot on film and it's grainy and nasty and everything looks grimy, well, they shoot most of the movie that way. They certainly shoot the 70s portion of the movie that way, which means they are constantly intercutting with archive footage of New York in the 70s, and it blends seamlessly, which to be fair, I imagine saved them an awful lot of money. But then what I love even more is as the movie transitioned into the 80s, the texture of the film changed again, and it had more of a videotape quality, because obviously we get the rise of home video cameras and videotapes and cassettes, etc, etc. And when I say videotape quality, what I mean is, and you'll, if you're old enough to remember, you'll have seen this, but you get that beautiful colour bleed, that really garish, gorgeous, nasty colour bleed, lines on the screen, you get high contrast when everything starts to look a little strange and plasticine and weird, and I love it when films do this. So as the movie moves on past the kind of halfway point, we've already seen Trump do some despicable things, but we get into the more personal nastiness of him. And the guy next to me is quieting down a bit. At the time, I thought because he realised it wasn't necessarily painting Trump in the best light. That's what I thought. But curiously, we see Trump do some awful things in this movie, some really morally abhorrent and detestable things. And at the end of the movie, I almost wanted to turn and ask him, hey, you said you liked Trump. What did you think of the film? But I didn't need to, because he turned to his mate at the end and said, oh, that was a really good movie. And I thought, what? Like, I thought you loved this guy, and it just painted him as a monster. It was so weird. It was weird to me. I almost wanted to chase him down and kind of ask him, do you still like Trump? Did that movie change your perspective? And if you do still like Trump, why? At the center of the movie is the relationship between Trump and Roy Cohn, or more specifically, their relationship with morality. And ultimately, what does it get for them? Because it seems to generate a lot for them. At the beginning of the film, Roy Cohn is in his prime, Roy Cohn is doing very well financially, and Donald Trump obviously builds his empire, and I know he goes bankrupt and stuff several times, and it's built on a lot of debt, etc. But for all intents and purposes, at the beginning of the film, you know, he's using Roy Cohn's methodology, and these three rules, the three rules that Roy Cohn implement that very much work for Trump. But as the movie goes on, you begin to realize they're not working. They work if you want to have money, I suppose, and they work if you want to have a bit of wealth and if you want to screw people over. And I'm going to put a bit of a spoiler warning in inverted commas here, because this is all historical record. But Roy Cohn becomes ill, and it becomes clear that he has AIDS. And it's here that you start to see him change, because suddenly his friends, in inverted commas, are not there for him. They're treating him differently. Donald Trump is not there for him. And towards the end of the movie, in the last movement of his life, Donald brings him to Mar-a-Lago and throws a birthday party and presents him with these supposed platinum diamond cufflinks, and then proceeds to humiliate him in this speech at the party. And Ivana then leans over and tells Roy Cohn these aren't platinum diamonds, these are cheap knockoffs. Roy Cohn, at the end of his life, has no one who loves him and supports him. And the person he created, the person he supported the most, is humiliating him. And he just takes it. And there's a moment where he stands up meekly to blow out the candles on his birthday cake, and he breaks down. He breaks down into tears, and I wonder if that moment is about him realizing, I have nothing. When you look at death, for those of us who have been in a situation where someone's been diagnosed with something terminal, it can be a very humbling experience, because you suddenly realize what is most important in your life. All those trinkets you've accrued, they're not going with you, and the thing that those people who are dying want, they just want their family around them. And in that moment, when Roy Cohn is approaching death, who does he have? He has Donald Trump. Can you think of anyone you want less in that moment than him? And as for Trump's arc, he's so excited when he's going to marry Ivana Trump. He's so excited and so passionately in love. And Roy says to him, marriage is all about contract and you're going to sign away a load of your assets. We need to draw up a prenuptial agreement. And he makes the process about legality and not about their love. And it's so sad and pathetic when that becomes the thing. And at the start of that, what should have been an amazing love story is now bogged down in legalese. Basically, I need a prenup because I don't trust you and my assets are more important than our love. And if you watch Trump the American Dream, or if you've read any books about him or whatever, you always get the sense that Ivana was probably the great love of his life. But now he's conditioned himself to think of, well, you're only a killer or a loser. You only have wealth or you have nothing or whatever. But he's looking to fill that hole. He's looking to fill his life with things and victory and garish towers and stuff. It's no secret that, his dad wasn't a particularly loving person and maybe didn't say he was proud of him enough, and that follows through. And so for both Trump and Cohn, those rules of always attack, always claim victory, deny everything, whatever, yeah, it got them to places. But in the end, what did they have? And if you think about Trump now, whatever side of the aisle you sit, whether you support him or you don't support him, imagine his life, because yes, he's wealthy, but he's under constant criminal investigations. His current marriage looks like the most depressing thing I've ever seen in my life. The man was shot in the head, and where the hell was Melania Trump? She barely turned up to condemn this in any strong way or to support her husband. And that's who he is. That's what he's got. The world is kind of laughing at him in all sorts of ways, outside of America anyway. So yeah, I loved this movie. I loved it so much. I'll probably go and see it again when I'm not sat next to a Trump supporter. I think if you are a Trump fan, apparently, you'll enjoy it because this guy did, but if you don't like Trump or if you're neutral about it, I think you'll get a lot from it. And I think for those who want to understand Trump a little better from a human perspective, and when I say understand, I don't mean agree with and I don't mean sympathize with, I mean understand where this person comes from, because I think Trump can be lost behind the brand and the monolith. And I think to humanize him is to reduce him to what he actually is, which in this case, I think is a very insecure and very strange man. And that is my take on him. And you might disagree, but it's interesting to watch whether you like him or not, because I think humanizing him is important. Sebastian Stan has been out there talking about this. I think I'm paraphrasing here, but he said he wasn't an alien that came down to Earth. He was made on planet Earth. And to me, humanizing any kind of president, monarch, whatever is important, because we must remember that they're human and not a symbol of purity, right? So yeah, I really recommend this movie. Go and see it. Let me know what you think. And I don't know. I don't know how to end these things yet.